In five, four, three.
Hey, everyone. Hey. We're
Five,
getting
four,
going.
three.
We're getting going here momentarily. Getting going. We are going live. Holding on, hanging on. Welcome. Hi, Deb. Hi to everyone who's joining us. And, if you're joining us, feel free to say hello in the chat and where you are, maybe, or how long you've been an activist and or a vegan, and what you're looking forward to tonight if you want to share. We are gonna have a nice interactive questions and answers toward the after Dara's presentation, but we're just gonna wait another moment or two to let some more folks find us. And then we'll start officially, but you're here on AAM's YouTube channel, so we really appreciate that. And certainly while you're here, please, if you could subscribe, then you can really find out everything we're doing and all of our live programs. Yes, Tucson, Arizona, Deb, thank you so much. Welcome, Tucson, Arizona. Excellent. Anyone else with us? Feel free to say hi. I'm going to get started in just a moment. Austin, Texas. Awesome. Thank you, Caitlin. How awesome that you're with us. Loving it. I'm here on the East Coast, and so is Dara. So we are a little bit ahead of y'all, but not too much. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and and introduce our program so we can go ahead and get started in just a moment. So then, greetings, animal allies. Welcome to another AAM live stream workshop designed to help you become a more knowledgeable, effective, and outspoken advocate for the animals. Tonight, I'm here with Dara, author and animal law professor. And my name is Michelle Granberg. I'm your moderator. I'm a mentor and team member with Animal Activism Mentorship. AAM is a multinational program supporting seasoned as well as new fledgling activists. Our mission is to empower activists to reach their full potential and equip them with the tools, community, and resources they need to boldly participate in our global animal liberation movement. Founded in 2020, AAM offers a free 3-month mentorship program which pairs experienced activists with aspiring activists. Additionally, we offer free educational online programs like this one. We have a podcast called the Animal Liberation Hour, and we host large-scale in-person activism events around the country. If you're interested in applying to become a mentor or mentee, or want to get involved or to donate, please visit our website, animalactivismmentorship.com. We'll be taking your questions after the presentation, so you can kind of hold your questions for a little bit, and we'll ask you for your questions. And please do keep in mind to keep your comments and questions kind and respectful and generally on topic. All right. So welcome someone from Easton, PA, and welcome east of Atlanta, and welcome CDA Activism. You're all welcome to be here. Okay, so I'm going to introduce Dara Lovitz is a passionate activist and working mother of twin daughters who cares deeply about making the world a kinder place. She's an author, professor, presenter, and co-founding board member of Peace Advocacy Network, a 501c3 nonprofit organization that promotes a peaceful existence through veganism, social justice, and respect for the Earth's inhabitants and resources. She is author of Muzzling a Movement and an adjunct professor of animal law and a continuing legal education project coordinator for the American Law Institute. That's a mouthful. She presents in various forums across the country on animal law, veganism, and parenting topics. All right, Dara, go ahead and take it away. You can unmute.
Thanks, Michelle, and thanks to AAM for the kind invitation to come. I'm so pleased to speak with you today. Today's topic, the main point, is to discuss why or how this activist, who is rescuing a hen from a battery cage facility, is considered to be one of the most dangerous domestic terrorists in the country, and in the same category as this person in the top left, top right corner. That's Dylan Roof. He shot up a church in 2015, killing 9 parishioners when they were doing their Bible study, and he did it in the name of white supremacy. So that's also domestic terrorism. So both of these two criminals, according to the federal government, are in the same category of domestic terrorism. Again, one rescuing an egg-laying hen and one shooting up a church in the name of white supremacy. So this is animal rights activism and the law. Our agenda: government repression of animal activists. We'll talk about the Animal Enterprise Terrorism Act, some of the history and politics behind it. We'll talk about ag-gag bills and First Amendment rights of animal activists, animal rights activists in the news, and some creative outlets for activism. And I'm going to do my best to stay on track. And at some points, I would like to have some participation, and I hope it's not too clunky with the YouTube live streaming. But I appreciate, again, I just appreciate being here and talking about this, because obviously I'm very passionate about it. So let's start with government repression of animal activists. And I want to talk about government repression generally at first. So it's also called political repression. You may have heard political repression more. This is the government's efforts to control, limit, or prevent activism or social movements. The way it manifests is usually surveillance, police brutality, imprisonment, forced disappearance, murder, and stripping of civil rights. What it's not is important. Government repression is not governance. Governance is the set of laws that we have to follow so that there's order in society, and the government is allowed to govern. That's their job, and we need them to do that. What we don't need them to do, and what's unconstitutional for them to do, is to repress messages because they don't like the message, to repress free speech of animal rights activists or other social movements because it's inconvenient when those voices get heard. So it's important to know what it's not. Modern realities of government repression. I say this because I'm 45. So the way activism has been over the past couple of decades of my activism career, totally different and totally changed. So you might look at this and say, there's nothing modern about it. This is my reality. For me, these are modern forms. So the first point is actually very interesting to me. Perceived risks of government sanctions increase. They don't decrease. They increase the motivations to engage in collective actions, right? So it's almost counter to what the government wants. The more repressive they are, the more the desire of the people to engage in some kind of collective action. And this is based on studies done in 2016 and 2021. So very recent studies have proved this is the case. Artificial intelligence, here's where we're talking about the modern stuff. AI, it is so interesting to me. I think at first we were all pretty scared of it, but it can help. There's suggestions that AI can be a useful tool to activists. For instance, if you start a 501c3 nonprofit, or you want to open a farm sanctuary and you want to put content up on your website, you could use AI to help write your content. You could use AI to help design an animal rights poster or something. So artificial intelligence can absolutely be useful. It's also being used in different ways of social movements. There was an example used. I thought this was cool. There was a project that used predictive modeling to create a 6-point index assessing the top predictors of youth homelessness. And that could help communities preventively identify at-risk youth and prioritize them for intensive housing interventions. So AI can absolutely be used for good, for social movements, for activism. And then we get to social media and it's amazing, right? This is, again, something that we didn't have when I started out as an activist, but to use social media to organize protests or to collaborate on a project across the country with one another, or to post videos of animal cruelty, or to educate people, or to or vegan cooking videos. Oh my gosh, I have so many great recipes that I got from Instagram. I mean, this is just a totally new world. So social media is amazing for veganism and for animal rights activism. As wonderful as it is, it's also super harmful and dangerous. It expands government surveillance. So everything we're doing on social media is being watched. It can be surveilled quite easily. It's there for the public to see, and it's there for the government to see. So we have to be really careful. And then, of course, the downside to saying what you want and talking about your issues is that other people are going to be talking about their issues. And there's certainly a lot of dissemination of disinformation. So spreading of lies is quite easy on social media. So, it's a little bit good, a little bit evil. So now let's talk about government repression of animal activists. These laws in America started with the term eco-terrorist. So eco-terror laws in general, I want to talk about what they are. In general, they're laws that criminalize the interference or disruption of an animal enterprise or of an environmental organization. Originally, the original eco-terrorists were just like the people who would protest the logging industry, and they'd sort of sit up in a tree and not let the loggers cut the tree down. So those were like the original environmental radicals, according to the government. Those are the original eco-terrorists. But let's just break down the term a little bit. So we have eco, which is like nature, ecology, environment. And then we have terror. And this is a picture of Daniel Pearl. And I don't know if anyone remembers Daniel Pearl. He was a 38-year-old Wall Street reporter. He was captured while he was investigating Richard Reed. Richard Reed is the reason that when you go to fly on a plane and you're in the TSA line to get screened, you have to take your shoes off, right? You take your shoes off and you put them in a bin, and you take your cell phone, you put that in a bin, you take off your jacket. The reason you take off your shoes is because of Richard Reed. He tried to blow up a plane by detonating a bomb that was in his shoe. So that's why your shoes have to go through these security machines now. But before we knew who Richard Reed was, we could just wear our shoes through those security lines. But anyway, so this is a picture of Daniel Pearl. He was captured in Karachi, and he was captured by these international terrorists who were making a point, and they ended up not shooting him. They ended up slitting his throat, and they didn't even capture it on camera, so they reenacted it after he was already dead. It was like a horrible thing. Obviously, he left behind a wife who gave birth to a son 4 months after Daniel died. So I use that because when I was sort of age, that was the biggest example of terrorist I can think of terrorism that I could think of. And so to combine concern for the environment that eco-terrorists have, and I'm using air quotes, with this kind of terrorism is just, it obviously doesn't sit well. So here we have these disturbing pictures. According to the FBI, in the last accounting they did for a 1-year period, there were more than 8,000 single bias incidents involving more than 11,000 victims. And the vast majority of those were victims who were targeted because of their race or ethnicity or ancestry bias. We also have gender identity, crimes against people because of orientation or religious bias. And the FBI report also showed that when Trump was in office, hate crimes targeting Muslims doubled, which coincided with Trump's efforts to instate a, quote, complete and total shutdown of Muslims entering the country. So we have these legit domestic terrorists, just like that Dylan Roof that I showed you in that second slide. And I want to ask a question. Now we're going to YouTube, Michelle. So my question is, which states have the highest number of hate groups? I'm just curious what people think. Name your top 3 states that you think have the highest number of hate groups. And hate groups are the ones that espouse anti-Semitism, white supremacy, all the friendly photos you see on the image on the slide right now.
All right, everybody heard her question, and I wrote it in the chat. Which states do you think have the highest number of hate groups? So CD Activism is guessing New York or DC. Anybody else have a guess? Anybody else besides New York or DC want to answer that question? Texas, maybe? Someone's CDA Activism says. Anybody else? Anybody have a different guess? And Dara will tell us. So which states have the highest number of hate groups?
Okay, the number 1 state with the highest number of hate groups is California.
That was the next guess.
Yeah, it used to be Pennsylvania, and I used to carry that with some amount of pride, like, look where I come from. But but it's California now. They have the highest number of hate groups, followed by, I'm surprised no one said this, Florida, and then followed by Texas. So somebody did guess Texas correctly. So we have California, Florida, Texas, and that's followed by New York, Pennsylvania, Tennessee, Virginia, Georgia, North Carolina, and Arizona. So despite the violent crimes like rape and execution-style murders and beatings and bombings. Despite all that, these domestic terrorists don't scare the government as much as animal rights activists. According to the FBI, oh, you know what? I have a quote on a different page, but basically animal rights activists were considered at one point to be the #1 domestic terror threat. So this is a headline from 2017. In America, rescuing a piglet makes you a terrorist, but shooting up a concert doesn't. And I don't know if anyone remembers, but think back, and Michelle, this will be another question. In 2017, what concert are they referring to? Does anyone remember? You don't have to name the musician, but do you remember the general event?
So wait, say that again. What concert are they referring to on this slide you're asking?
Correct. This is from 2017.
Okay, where a terrorist shot up the concert. Who knows? Someone did that, and that. So let's see if anybody. So Las Vegas?
Yeah, that's right. That's absolutely right. So
Deb was right. Deb Thompson got it.
Good job, Deb. Yeah, so in Vegas, there was a shooting by a gentleman named Stephen Paddock, and he shot all these people who were just at this Las Vegas concert, just having a good time. He shot 58 people. I'm sorry, he shot more than that. He killed 58 people from like a hotel room above where the concert was. So around the same time, Direct Action Everywhere rescued 2 piglets. Now, this author is making a point that the rescuers of the piglets are considered terrorists, whereas Stephen Paddock, who murdered 58 people at that Las Vegas concert, is not considered a terrorist. Why? Why is Stephen Paddock, who killed 58 people at this Las Vegas concert, why is he not a terrorist?
I'm putting that in the chat. That's Dara's question. Why is Stephen not considered a terrorist while DXC, when they rescued piglets, are considered terrorists? Anybody know? Anybody have a guess? Let's see if anybody does. We got to give it a moment because I know we have a little delay before they get the question. So why is Stephen not considered a terrorist while rescuing piglets is considered terrorism? Does anybody know? Does anybody know? Give it a second. Because of money? CDA activism says because of money. Emma says probably because there's a financial interest to protect agriculture. We'll take one more guess and then Dara will tell us. Because DXC is political, CDA activism is saying. Not a member of a group. Deb Thompson says not a member of a group.
These are great responses. I mean, they're almost all correct, but I'd say CD activism is the most accurate. If you do any crime in the name of a political motive, when you're motivated by politics or some kind of movement, that can qualify you for terrorism. Apparently, Stephen Paddock had no religious affiliation. He had no political motivation. He didn't have like a Facebook stream where he was quoting Hitler or anything. They couldn't find anything. He just killed people for no political motive, so he's not considered a terrorist. He's considered a murderer. I mean, that's murder, and he would be tried as a murderer, but he wouldn't be tried as a terrorist because he had no political motivation. Now, one of you had answered money, and that is that's not inaccurate. It's an attenuated way, and I will explain the money behind the politics of these laws that make animal rights activists terrorists. So yes, absolutely money is part of the answer. It's not the direct answer, but that's absolutely a valid answer to this. And when I get further into this, I'll explain why. But so just to, put it on the nose, rescuing a piglet is terrorism. Murder, when it's not done in the name of politics or some kind of ideology, is not terrorism. Here's my quote. In 2008, the FBI wrote, "Together, eco-terrorists and animal rights extremists are one of the most serious domestic terrorism threats in the US." Okay, so why do I argue that the label terrorist for animal rights activists is inaccurate? I'm sure you all agree with me. I don't have to prove it to you. But the definition of terrorist, according to the government, according to their own experts, and by the way, if you look at federal opinions, how they define terrorism, there are 94 different ways they define terrorism in various federal court cases across the country. So even they can't really agree on the exact definition, but it boils down to Violence is a necessary component. Usually it has a conspiratorial cell structure. There's often taking of hostages. They harm persons, not property. The idea is to harm persons. And then CBRN, chemical, biological, radiological, nuclear warfare. And again, animal rights activism is based in ahimsa, a philosophy of nonviolence. And if we think about the most essential animal liberation group, and I would say the one that the world perceives as the most dangerous, the Animal Liberation Front, if you look at their guidelines, and I encourage you to read all their guidelines, but one of their guidelines is to take all necessary precautions against harming any animal, human and non-human. So how can this group that espouses ahimsa and nonviolence and taking action, taking precautions against harming any animal, human and non-human, how can they be considered terrorists, which by necessity have to be violent? There was a quote from, I think it was Rod Coronado. Yes, so Rod Coronado, who's a famous animal liberationist, he said, if animal rights activists started justifying violence to supposedly prevent violence, we lose our moral high ground. Targeting property was our modus operandi. Targeting people, never. In other words, animal rights activists will cause damage to property, no problem, but we do not cause harm to people, and we're not a violent group because that's antithetical to what motivates us. So I think that's super important. I put this slide in here, this next slide. Ocha is a movie, it's available on Netflix. It is so good, and I just watched it again because I wanted to find this image, and then I was gonna bring in some video footage from it and risk violating copyright. And then I just got sucked in and I watched it again. I think every animal rights activist would appreciate this movie, and I think you should watch this movie. Something about it, and that's why it's relevant now in this part of this discussion, is because in Ocha, there's actors who are representing an Animal Liberation Front cell, and they go to such extreme lengths to not harm the people who are trying to harm this creature. And they'll do anything they'll do anything nonviolent to thwart the actions of these Korean police officers. And it's just it's very humorous. It's a very humorous movie, but they do this in a really creative way to show these people don't want to harm people. They'll do anything not to harm people. And they always say, we come in peace. We don't want to hurt you. Please let the animal go. You know, they're emphasizing, we don't want to hurt you, the person. We just want to save the animal. And the way this movie shows that is really beautiful. So it's free if you have a Netflix subscription. Go watch it after you hang up with me. Okay, so Animal Enterprise Terrorism Act. From my history, from my research, I saw a discernible timeline representing activism and its connection to legislation, the laws that came out to inhibit animal activism. And I'll go through these briefly. So in the 80s, there were different break-ins at head trauma labs and vivisection facilities, and we have the Food Security Act being enacted, the Farm Animal and Research Facilities Protection Act, which talked about this destructive nature of terrorist acts against research facilities, which have slowed medical research that is dedicated to improving human well-being and denying hope to those with presently incurable diseases. This is the language that comes up at these congressional hearings. And it makes it seem like the people who are trying to save your lives and to save your children's lives, they're being thwarted by these terrorist animal radicals, animal activist radicals. So that's the kind of language that we're up against. And then we have Rick Scarsey, a professor who was in prison for refusing to testify in front of a grand jury. We have the Congress directing reports on animal rights extremism, and the Animal Enterprise Protection Act, which is the statute that ensnared Shaq, Stop Huntington Animal Cruelty. This is like too much of a subject to get into now, but that was to combat the animal rights terrorist creation of a growing atmosphere of fear among farmers and researchers. Again, quote unquote, people to whom the nation owes so much. So this is, again, the language of the congressional hearings. We have a fur farm raid in the 90s. We have another House hearing. And again, I'll let this slide speak for themselves, but the more active animal rights activists are and the more impact they have causing monetary damages, that's important. If you rescue a couple of animals, it doesn't cost a lot of money, no big deal. But these congressional hearings were because a lot of the damage was costly to pharmaceutical industries or to farms. And I think they were scared. One farm we can deal with. But when multiple farms get raided and multiple pharmaceutical labs are broken into, we have a money problem. Like, we have serious industries who have a lot of money to earn and to lose. They start getting behind the ear of the lawmakers. So, and then we have the shack arrest and the prosecution. And I would just direct people, I know this is self-serving, but in my book, Muzzling a Movement, I go into great detail about shack, Stop Huntington Animal Cruelty, but they are kind of the test case for the Animal Enterprise Terrorism Act. They were actually tried under the Animal Enterprise Protection Act. That's the predecessor to the Animal Enterprise Terrorism Act. But the way that went down and the trial against them, it's really interesting information. And if you care about animal activists and the law, that's the place to start, is learning about shack. So I looked into, I was curious about who was sponsoring, which lawmakers were sponsoring the Animal Enterprise Terrorism Act and what was motivating them. And there's a website that, it's opensecrets.org. It's the Center for Responsive Politics. And they give you like a money trail, basically. They tell you what groups are funding which politicians. So I looked at James Inhofe, who was, he said he's responsible for saying global warming is the greatest hoax perpetrated on the American people. He owns like almost $1 million in energy-related businesses, but he's no friendlier to animal rights than he is to environmental causes. The American Farm Bureau named him Friend of Farm Bureau. The Oklahoma Farm Bureau honored him with a Lifetime Achievement Award. The Oklahoma Pork Council gave him a Distinguished Service Award. And I think you probably know where I'm going, but this guy, the farmers are in this guy's pockets, right? They are giving him money because they want him to pass laws that help them. So he sponsored the Animal Enterprise Terrorism Act because the farmers stand to lose a lot of money if animal activists continue animal activism. They are a threat. So Charles Denholm, same thing. This guy is out of Texas. His top 10 contributors were the National Cattlemen's Beef Association, the Dairy Farmers of America, and the United Egg Association. Same motivation as Inhofe. It's like these farmers are giving him all this money. He enacts this legislation that harms animal activists because animal activists are a threat to the farming industry. You know we're doing something right when these industries have to spend so much money to keep us silent. Now, this third politician, I bring her up not to disrespect her. You know, I know she passed away recently, but she co-sponsored the AETA, the Animal Enterprise Terrorism Act. But when I looked at her donors, like her top donors, it was women's orgs, like women's rights organizations, senior citizens groups, the entertainment industry. And I was like, what do any of these people have against animal activists? Like, I couldn't see the connection. So then I looked beyond her senatorial office and I looked into her bedroom, not in a creepy way. I just looked at whom she was married to. She was married to Richard Blum, who is chairman of the board of the CB Richard Ellis Group, CBRE. They are a large commercial, they're a firm that deals with like commercial real estate enterprises, and their biggest clients are AstraZeneca, Wyeth, Merck, Novartis, Pfizer. Why is this important? Because it's the pharmaceutical industry, right? And they stand to lose a lot when animal activists have their way. So in concluding this section, people usually ask me if the Animal Enterprise Terrorism Act, I'm just looking at my time, has been applied, after Shack, and it has. There have been a couple cases. Johnson and Lang were prosecuted under the AETA for releasing minks from a mink farm. And then there's the Buddenberg case. Literally 4 activists were prosecuted for chalking. You heard that right, applying chalk onto a sidewalk. Thankfully, those charges were dropped, but it has been applied. Okay, so I am going to, we discussed Animal Enterprise Terrorism Act. I want to get to ag-gag bills. Ag-gag bills, so it's like agriculture gag bills, they criminalize the taking of photos, videos, or audio recording on a farm without the permission of the owner. And I want to introduce this topic by talking about the Esmond Shade case. This is a case I worked on when I was a young, naive lawyer, and I was appointed special prosecutor to prosecute an egg-laying facility. So this top photo is a picture of the farm from the street, and that's all you see. You see these windowless sheds miles from the street. Like that's actually a picture that's taken on the property. So that's not even street view. But the point is, It's like, it reminds me of that Paul McCartney quote, if slaughterhouses had glass walls, we'd all be vegetarian. These are windowless sheds. You can't see a thing, especially not from the street. And this bottom picture shows the vast concentration of hens. I think, so there were 7 windowless sheds total. Let me see if I got this right. There were 600,000 hens total. This photo shows about 85,000 hens in battery cages stacked 4 tiers high. And the investigator of our group at the time, it was Compassion Over Killing, they sent an investigator in. He applied to work as a farmer here, and he took like video footage using a spy camera. And his job was to help production. So if there was a dead bird on the conveyor belt, he would have to remove the bird. If the conveyor belt needed to be fixed, and the conveyor belt is what sort of slides onto the cages to capture the eggs, to collect the eggs. So his job is just to like keep things running smoothly. You know, obviously efficiency is important to these companies. So he was able to capture some photos and videos. This is one hen whose beak was caught in a wire. Both of the hens in these pictures are dead, but look at how skinny and sick they are. And even under Pennsylvania, this is a Pennsylvania farm, under Pennsylvania Health Code, you're not allowed to have live hens in the same cage as dead hens. It's just not like clean or hygienic. And so this is just a violation of all kinds of codes. But anyway, we prosecuted, let me see if I have any other pictures. Oh yeah, so another job of our investigator was he had to push a shopping cart down these windowless sheds and collect dead birds. So he was supposed to collect dead birds, but look, he's only like maybe 1/10 of the way through the shed, and he's already filled the shopping cart. So it was almost an impossible task to collect all the dead hens in a day's time. He just kept having to empty that shopping cart. So anyway, we filed 35 counts of animal cruelty against the farm owner and the farm supervisor, including neglect, allowing hens to starve, impaling the hens, etc. We presented evidence of 2 avian veterinarians who were amazing and gave really compelling testimony. And if we had time for a poll, I'd ask you if you thought we won the case. You would probably guess that we did not win, and you would be correct. We lost the case. We had no precedent in Pennsylvania. In other words, we had no law in Pennsylvania we could rely on that said that egg-laying hens are worthy of like an animal cruelty case. So there were other reasons we lost, and I could get into that later, but I'm worried about time now. But I did want to talk about this case because there's like one good thing, other than the fact that I met some really nice activists. There was one great thing that came out of this, which was press coverage. The media was in the courtroom every day, and it was recording everything our avian veterinarian expert was saying, everything our investigator said about how he saw these hens starving. All of that was captured by the media. They were there and writing great articles. So here are some titles. Farm goes on defense. Animal cruelty charges come home to roost. There's got to be a pun here, right? Professor, egg harm had deteriorating cages, neglected birds. So we got such great press all over about this case. And I separated out these headlines because I thought they were pressing. Eggplant, not eggplant, but eggplant loses bid to suppress animal activist evidence, and graphic undercover video leads to animal cruelty charges. Now, obviously, I'm emphasizing something here. It was our evidence. It was the photographs. It was the videos that enabled us to try this case and get this great press coverage. If the ag-gag bills were in place at the time, and again, this is back in 2006, the public wouldn't see the images because they wouldn't hear about it from the media reporters. We wouldn't have a case. Here are images the public won't see. They won't see what it's like for a bird to get their beak seared. They won't see veal in crates or sows in crates, like all of the images we know about animal cruelty. And I'm sure if we polled the people watching right now and we said, why are you vegan? Why are you an animal activist? I am almost certain more than 95% would say, I watched Earthlings, or I saw a video online, or I saw pictures. I know that's why I'm vegan, is pictures and videos and Earthlings, all of those things. So the power of this imaging, and of sound recordings too, it's so important for the movement. So another thing about ag-gag bills that's important, animal rights activists aren't the only ones who are possibly silenced. People who care about labor violations, people who care about food safety, those people also have an interest in making sure that what's happening on these farming in these farming facilities is clean and legit and safe and ethical. So it's not just animal rights, it's also a public health issue, it's also a labor and employment issue. It's really important that ag bills don't survive. I put this slide in because the ALDF, the Animal Legal Defense Fund, has a fabulous website. The URL is at the bottom, and it keeps you updated. Now, as you see, thankfully, only 4 states show where ag-gag bills have passed, and they're currently good law. Everything else, either the legislation was defeated, or it's currently under, it's under a lawsuit, or it was struck down as unconstitutional. So ag-gag bills, they sound scary, but they're not really a threat. They really don't silence the animal rights movement like the Animal Enterprise Terrorism Act does, because courts are striking down ag-gag laws across the country. And that's a great thing, obviously. So, okay, First Amendment rights of animal activists. There are 3 important elements that I just want to break down: abridgment of speech, viewpoint discrimination, and federalization of state crimes. Abridgment of speech. We all know the First Amendment. Congress shall not make a law that abridges the freedom of speech or the right of people to assemble. That is one of the most important parts of our law as Americans, of our democracy. It's like the ability to say what you want, even if what you want to say isn't popular. In fact, the First Amendment was written to protect the minority voice, not the majority voice, not whatever the president says in the White House or in the State of the Union. It's to protect the people who disagree with the president, who disagree with the majority. As Noam Chomsky said, if we don't believe in freedom of expression for the people we despise, then we don't believe in it at all. So First Amendment and the protection of free speech is just essential parts of being American. Viewpoint discrimination. The government isn't allowed to punish you based on your viewpoint. So let's say there's a protest and a counter protest. And the protest is saying, Taylor Swift sucks. And then the counter protest says, Taylor Swift rocks. The government can't punish the ones who say Taylor Swift sucks. They can't. And then not punish the ones that say Taylor Swift rocks. In other words, the government can't choose which messaging it likes or which messaging it agrees with. The government has to apply laws equally. So the Animal Enterprise Terrorism Act, I think it was obvious how it silences free speech, but also it specifically targets animal activists. Like, it basically protects those who want to harm animals. It protects animal enterprises, and it calls those of us who want to protect animals terrorists because we are causing harm to these animal facilities. So it's suppressing animal activist speech based on what we're saying. And that's totally unconstitutional. It's called viewpoint discrimination. It's not constitutional. The last thing was federalization of state crimes. The Animal Enterprise Terrorism Act is a federal law, not a state law. It's a federal law, which means to prosecute under it, you might be in front of a grand jury. Grand juries are inherently unconstitutional. The defendant has no right to an attorney. The evidence rules don't apply. Almost anything can be used against the defendant. Like more than 95 or 96% of grand juries end up in convictions or prosecutions of the defendant. Also, when you're tried under a federal law, and if you're convicted, you're sent to a federal prison, which could be thousands of miles away from your home. If you're convicted in your state of a state law, you go to a prison in your state. Now, in certain states, that could still be a long drive for family members, but you're still within the state where you reside. Federal law, you break the law, you could wind up, again, thousands and thousands of miles away, and your family would have to fly. They would have to get on a plane to visit you. So an example of how this looks, federalization, is let's say a man burns down the house of his ex-wife. No one was in the house, no one was hurt. That's arson, right? That's illegal, it's property damage. He would be tried in state court for arson, for burning down a house. That's it. Let's say somebody burns down a house in the name of animal rights because it's the house of somebody who abuses animals. No one was hurt. It's just like the other example, except now it's in the name of animal rights. Now it's a federal crime. Now you've done something that could get you ensnared in the Animal Enterprise Terrorism Act. So the lighting of the match and the causing of the arson is the same. but the guy who did it in a marital dispute gets to be tried in state court, gets to defend himself fairly, and the person who did it in the name of animal rights is now stuck in federal court, and it's elevated. And when you are tried as a terrorist under the Animal Enterprise Terrorism Act, you have the stigma of being called a terrorist. You're in the no-fly zone list. You can't get a job. You have that label on your record. And so I argue that this kind of activity silences our movement. It silences the animal rights movement. There was I know I'm constantly aging myself, but as a Philadelphia activist in the early 2000s, there was a biotech industry organization. They had a huge conference being hosted in Philadelphia, and federal agents would just knock on activist doors and say, what do you have planned for the conference in June? What are you going to do? I mean, well, you don't have to answer those questions, but a lot of activists didn't know that, and they felt really scared, and they didn't go out to protest the BIO conference because the federal agents came to the door and scared them. And it's not just me saying that these laws, like the Animal Enterprise Terrorism Act and all the aggressive prosecution of animal rights activists, it's not just me saying that that has silenced the movement. According to the Center for Strategic and International Studies, there was a notable decrease in the number of terrorist attacks and plots, and by the way, terrorist attacks is their language, obviously, and plots conducted by animal rights extremists from 94 to 2021, including 6 whole years absent of attacks and plots. So again, this isn't just me saying, my friends don't feel like talking or don't feel like showing up at protests. It's not just me. This is like actual data that our activism has been silenced in somewhat. Okay, I'm going to shift to animal rights activists in the news. I might breeze through this because I do want to get to questions. So again, I'm a Philly girl, and I have to show you something that happened in Philly. This is an Eagles fan who literally, I can't even say this with a straight face, it's so ridiculous, but he punched a horse in the face. He punched a police horse in the face. He was drunk and he was rowdy because the Eagles Super Bowl, and we can't just have a good thing, Philly. Like, we've got to go and punch a police horse. So these guys, so this is one of the Eagles fans. I say this as an Eagles fan, by the way. I love the Philadelphia Eagles, but I am not in love with the Philadelphia Eagles fans. Look what these people do. So these guys got together and knocked over a Jeep. In the bottom photo, they're standing on the canopy at the Ritz Carlton. Like, why? This guy sitting on a traffic pole, and I don't know if you heard, Philadelphia starts, now we grease our poles. We put grease on our traffic poles anytime the Eagles have like a big game because we're scared people are going to climb up the traffic poles and like sit on a traffic light. Like, that's what it's come to. So this is Philly, guys. But there's a reason. Oh, these people are on a bus stand. Again, we won the Super Bowl. Why are you doing this? Okay. So our mayor at the time, he says, every city that's gone through this has had this celebration. There's always somebody, some element of people who do this. He said, there were literally tens of thousands of people on the street, and the knucklehead contingent was extremely small. For the Eagles parade, the small number of knuckleheads should stay home. Now, I bring this up because all this drunken vandalism, we just chuckle and we say, ugh, the knuckleheads, we just excuse it. And it's this kind of forgiveness that is only extended to like this kind of thing. So we're going to move on to a bunch of sober animal rights activists. Here's a February 4th article. This is from the same year. So it's from 2018 from The Sun, which is Great Britain. Look at the title, Vegan Vigilantes. Amazing. Vegan Vigilantes, violent hate campaign of militant vegans are targeting terrified farmers and butchers across the country. Look at that language, violent hate campaign. And then militant vegans are targeting, all of these are very loaded words, targeting terrified farmers and butchers across the country. And then in the small print, there's been a 360% rise in vegans over the last decade. So interesting that they decided to put a vegan statistic there because they're trying to scare the crap out of people and say that vegans are hateful people and we should be worried that veganism is on the rise. So in this article, we have shaking his head in disgust. The father of two says his kids were threatened, and we're right out of the gate with this word threatened. And then the article talks about a woman who is a livestock consultant, Dr. Jude Kapper. She survived breast cancer, and some animal rights activists sent her a vile tweet, and it was something like, "Why would someone who has breast cancer consume dairy? WTF, don't be shocked when the cancer comes back, LOL." So that's not nice. And that was in the article. It talks about mom of one. She told the son, "I've been astounded by the hate. It's difficult to deal with. People are animals too." So then the article talks about reformed gang member Joey Carbstrong is exporting his hate to the UK during a tour to promote veganism. He has likened farmers to slave owners. A former cocaine user who once spent 6 months in jail for possessing a firearm. And then he has this quote. So again, I obviously added the underlining to create emphasis, but I just want to show you the scoreboard from this one single article. The farmers are described as a dad of two, or a mom of one, or cancer survivor, or eco-friendly, or they're terrified. And then you contrast that with the description of vegans. You have a former gang member, a cocaine user. He was in jail for firearm possession. He operated this hate campaign, and he was militant and violent. This is how it was in the media. This is how animal rights activists were portrayed. Now we have Daniel Andreas San Diego, who was targeted for these eco-terror bombings. And the way he was described as a, quote, strict vegan whose face masks a violent hate that turned him into an eco-terrorist. And here's the best part, a vicious vegan with an axe to grind. So it was his opposition to animal vivisection that probably spurred him to allegedly bomb a building. But instead, they talk about his penchant for tofu as the motivating factor, like as though the vegan diet just makes people want to do violent things. And so I put tofu leads to arson because there's this obvious connection in the media about that. But I want to say, while that was very typical when I was a younger activist, now here are some titles. We have Bloomberg.com, The Guardian, CNN, New York Times, The Guardian, again, all very nice articles. When you read them, there's no inflammatory language like militant vegan or violent or, hateful. It's all very, very neutral. The exception, there's a reason for those asterisks, is this last one by the scientist. It's an opinion piece, time to take animal rights harassment more seriously. So the way media covers animal rights activists now, in general, the CNNs, the MSNBCs, they're all pretty neutral and cool. Where you still have the hate and the inflammatory language is in industry magazines, in Beef Magazine, in The Scientist. Anytime, it's mostly the science and farming industries, their media is very slanted against animal rights activists, but it's like, doesn't even feel like a threat. So the tides have turned, and that's a good thing. Okay, creative outlets for activism. I got this list from, most of these ideas are from Veg Fund, and I hope you know who Veg Fund is or are. They fund vegan activism. They have money to give you if you have a really cool idea for vegan activism. And they have criteria. You can't they're not just going to send you a check for anything. You have to fill out a report and apply for it, but they have some really nice ideas. So some creative outlets for activism. Art. Are you an artist? Do you like to draw? Do you like to sketch? Do you like to paint? A friend of mine does these little signs. This is my sign that says vegan kitchen. That's in my kitchen. And then I have this awesome cutting board I got at a Veg Fest, the Phoenixville Veg Fest that my nonprofit group organizes. So if you're an artist, sell artwork that talks about veganism, or don't sell artwork that talks about veganism, but on your table when people are looking at your non-vegan artware or, non-vegan specific, have some pamphlets, have some vegan recipes. You can be an activist wherever you are and whatever you do. And maybe you make art just for entertainment or mental health. You could just post a picture on social media and have some information there. So your activism can be done through art quite easily. Another way to be artistic, but you don't have to be artistic, because even I have terrible penmanship. I can't even read my own handwriting. And it's only gotten worse as I've typed on the laptop more and more. I can't read my own handwriting. However, when I use chalk on a sidewalk or on a street, I turn into somebody with some talent. It's for some reason it's legible, maybe because the letters are bigger. But anyway, the vegan chalk challenge, hashtag vegan chalk challenge. These are temporary displays because obviously the rain will wash it away, but also because it's temporary, nobody makes a stink about it. They just sort of walk on by. Bikers paths, walking paths, sidewalks. These are places where you're going to get tons of foot traffic before the next rainfall. In the middle, we have James D'Alto. He does some beautiful chalk work. And again, there's a hashtag vegan chalk challenge, and Free From Harm and some other orgs organize these. And it's a great way to reach people. Another way to reach people is literature. People go vegan because they learn about it. People aren't vegan because they don't know about it. And so you just have to educate people, and literature is a great way to do it. You can get flyers from PETA or another, you can get a vegan starter guide, leave some in your local coffee shop, at your gym, at your yoga studio. These are people who care about health. And if they don't care about animals, they care about themselves and they want to be healthy. So maybe just try that angle with them. Social media, I can't do this topic justice, but Mercy for Animals has done it justice. There's a link at the bottom here, Mercy for Animals, How to Dominate Social Media, and they have this 7-point display. It is so fabulous and so complete. So I very much urge you to go to mercyforanimals.org and look up How to Dominate Social Media. They've said it all, and I couldn't say it better. Clothing, wear it. These are, my wardrobe is like 90% vegan messaging, which is a problem sometimes because I don't always want to be a vegan all the time, but it's just like what I have in my closet. These are my kids. My daughter's shirt says, "Are you vegan yet?" And it's, I forget which org that was from. But anyway, so everywhere you go, you can just be wearing your vegan wear. And by the way, support a local vegan business. They're the ones selling this stuff. And pay-per-view and virtual reality, people aren't aware until they see it. And just like I had mentioned before, the images, the importance of imaging and videos and photographs, like people don't know unless they see it. You can host some kind of short pay-per-view. You give someone $1 to watch it on a VR goggle. We had a couple of those, Dans, and people will do anything for $1. You're like, hey, do you have 3 minutes? I'll give you $1. And people will do it. They're motivated by $1. But that's a great way to show people. It's just like gets the information in front of their eyes. You could do a film screening. And for this, you can charge. You can charge $15, $20 for access to the movie theater, and that'll help pay the rental fee. And then you show whatever movie you want. Dominion, Cowspiracy, Earthlings, whatever movie you want, you could show on a screen. You could do a film screening. Cubes of Truth, Anonymous for the Voiceless, is a growing organization in the vegan movement. They make use of these cubes of truth, which is a form of peaceful street activism. They have videos, and they often have somebody who's not masked and who's willing to engage in a conversation. So that's a great way to really make an impact. Music and songwriting. If you've heard any interview on AAM, on the podcast, I think you would know the math is about 85 to 90% of the guests on that show say they got into veganism because they were in the 90s punk rock scene, and that's how they got into veganism. So music is a really great way to educate people. If that's your thing, write a song and put it on social media and get it to go viral, and then throw in some nice little video in there, and you can really influence people. Last two things, marketing is a great way to get the voice out there about veganism or animal rights. And then billboards. If you can pool your resources, we did this one year back when Peace Advocacy Network, we were kind of like single issue. We didn't have a global reach. We were doing single issue things local to Philadelphia, and Philadelphia has this terrible, we're infamous for having horse-drawn carriages. Not as bad as New York, but like second to New York. And so we got a couple of orgs to pool their resources, and we bought a billboard, or we rented a billboard, telling people to vote and to, pressure our council person to ban horse-drawn carriages. Spoiler alert, it did not work. But that's not to say your billboard wouldn't work. So anyway, that is I'm sorry for breezing through, but I do want to get to questions. Here are some website credits for the photos. I'm going to stop sharing so I can see Michelle and maybe hear from any of you.
Oh my God, that was such an excellent presentation. Y'all agree that was just covered so much in that time. There was a couple of other ideas, since you were talking about creative activism, that people were mentioning, like bumper stickers. Deb Thompson and the 40-year-old vegan says 3-minute movie challenges have been great with We the Free. Those are great. Those are all great. We welcome more of those creative ideas.
That's great. I wrote them down. Thank you. That's great.
So I'm sure folks have lots of questions. So Dara is ready for your questions now. We'll give it a moment or two to have you put your questions in the chat or comments about anything that Dara covered, which she covered a lot. Talked about activism in the news and the Eco-Terrorist Act and repression. So Emma asks, can you talk about stickering and the legality surrounding it?
Does Emma mean stickering on like animal products, like putting Go Vegan on a slab of chicken in the grocery? Is that what we're talking about?
I assume so. Emma, is that what you mean? I can't, because I can't think of any other, just stickering on a stop sign sometimes, or on any, or it could be on flesh. So
I mean, I can comment on those two, and then if there's something else, let me know.
See if she has more specific, but yeah, if you can.
Yeah, stickering on stop signs is vandalism, and if you get caught, you could be convicted of vandalism. You're not going to go to jail for that kind of thing. So it might be a slap on the wrist, but it's absolutely illegal, and you could absolutely be arrested for vandalism if you're caught. And then stickering products that you're not going to buy, and I assume you're not going to buy that slab of chicken in the deli, and putting like a Go Vegan sticker on it, you are technically creating property damage. It's not your property because you haven't bought it. I don't know anyone who's ever been arrested or caught stickering in a supermarket. I really don't know anyone. I think maybe I just know really sly people, but it's like a very low level thing to do and easy to get away with, but it's not legal. I don't know, but like I said, I don't know anyone who's actually been arrested for it. That's not to say you couldn't get arrested. That's to say, never heard of anyone.
You have to be careful and assume that you're always on camera.
You're always on camera. Absolutely.
You have to assume no matter where you are, especially in a store.
Yeah, you're always on camera. Are they checking the camera? Don't know. Do they want to bother dealing with you? I don't know. It depends how many stickers you're putting on. Are you causing hundreds of dollars in damage by putting stickers on that many, frozen meal packs? So a lot of it depends on the gravity and the weight of it. It is not legal. You could get caught. So,
and they will waste, not that we care about, they're going to waste whatever you put it on. Is most likely they might have a rule in their store that they have to now throw it out just because there's a, right. I don't know, maybe that's a good thing, but, and I do it occasionally, and I know we can't, but I'm always very careful to sort of cover my head and just sort of like do it so like you can't even see my arms move kind of thing. Okay, so let's go to the next then. From Deb Thompson, do you think single issue protests or demonstrations are a good use of our time? As opposed to, I guess, a long-term campaign, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, we had, as a nonprofit organization, we did go through this kind of existential crisis where we were, well, I'll tell you, I don't know if anyone knows Gary Francione, a professor of animal law out at Rutgers. He wrote so many books, but he also operates the Abolitionist Approach website. And we used to have him come to our vegan pledge programs and present to the people. And he gave us an earful one day about our horse-drawn carriage campaign and said, you're spending so much time and resources on horses. What are there, like 44 horses in Philadelphia who are on the carriages? Think of how much more impact you can have if you just do more vegan pledges. Replace your horse-drawn carriage campaign with 5 more vegan pledge programs, and you'll help animals across the board instead of just the horses. Again, just the 44 horses in Philadelphia. And when he made it so simplistic, and talked about numbers, it just became very utilitarian to us. Like it almost made no sense to do anything single issue anymore. So in that moment, we became a global vegan outreach organization, and we got rid of our only single issue at that. Well, we did circus protests too. So we did circus protests and we did horse-drawn carriage protests. And we just felt like we're a Philly group and this is a big Philly problem, so we're going to do this. But we really shifted after that talking to from Gary Francione. And I think, like, I don't like to criticize any group. I think the groups that are trying to get rid of horse-drawn carriages in New York are doing a great job, and I want them to continue doing what they're doing. So I wouldn't say that they shouldn't do that. I don't love when organizations raise millions of dollars and then focus on cats. You know, I think with millions of dollars, that can be really help the vegan cause. So I think, you know, if people have ever heard me speak before, you know, I don't put down any part of our movement because I think we're all essential cogs in a wheel and we all make it move forward. And so I have no criticism for anyone. I just know for our organization, we got away from single issue. We felt like it was more honest to the people we were soliciting donations from to, you know, we say we're saving animals. We want to save the most animals and do the most impact with the dollars that we were raising. So we really just shifted to vegan outreach in general, as opposed to just that single issue. So that was just part of our personal journey. But again, I don't slam any activists. I think you're all doing amazing work and we need every one of you.
Yeah. Absolutely love it. So we have a couple more questions from Caitlin. Can you briefly talk about facing being possibly sued for harassment when it comes to pressure campaigns or protests, and better security culture to try your best to avoid that?
Yeah, security culture is so important. Anyone interested in security culture, I really recommend Peter Young as an author. He talks a lot about security culture in a really effective way. Security culture is just so important, and it's something that is so much harder in today's digital age. We have to be so careful. Harassment, that is problematic because I just remember, as someone who studied the trial transcripts from the Shack case when they were being prosecuted for Animal Enterprise Terrorism Act, the testimony that was the most impactful to the jury was these people who were like, they stood on my lawn and my kid got scared and my kid wanted to hold a knife and go to sleep with a knife in bed with him because he was so worried the animal rights activists would hurt us. And, you know, they were talking about the terror and the intimidation that they felt. And that goes a long way. So the second you cause someone to feel intimidated or harassed, you're getting into the territory of animal enterprise terrorism prosecution. So I would be really careful about that. I would be really careful about, like, try not to cross that line. Don't go to, you know, and there are laws, by the way, you can't go on people's front lawns. You know, in most states, you really can't go on people's front lawns to protest. You can go on the street, in the neighborhood, you can go to the town square, but you can't be on people's front lawns anymore. Again, in general, I know in Philadelphia, we have, like, you can be, I think, within 100 feet of someone's house. You can be within 50 feet of the corporate headquarters of the pharmaceutical lab, but you cannot be within 100 feet of the person's house or personal property. So a lot of these, the government is really concerned about people feeling safe and secure in their homes. So especially don't go to people's homes or their kids' soccer games and stuff to intimidate and harass. And I think harassment in general is problematic in the sense that it's easily prosecutable and it creates sympathy for the other side.
Can you just give a quick definition of security culture? Because someone was asking, and I also want to mention that AAM right here on our channel has several videos, trainings on security culture.
That's great. I wouldn't want to replace what the AAM has, so I think that should stand on its own. But security culture is the way that we keep ourselves safe, and the way we don't. I mean, the ALF is like the OGs of security culture, whereby they wouldn't even know. There would be a cell of animal liberationists who would get together. They wouldn't even know each other's real names. They wouldn't have personal cell phone numbers. They would have burner phones. Like, that way, if one of them got arrested, they couldn't snitch on another. So security culture is to prevent snitching, basically, or cooperation, which is what the government wants you to, that's the way the government would say it. They're just cooperating with the government. No, they're snitching. So security culture prevents snitching, and the more anonymity you have, the better. again, totally compromised by social media and digital activism. There's almost no anonymity anymore. So if AAM has these resources, I think that's a great place to go to.
Yeah, thanks so much. I hope people will watch that, because one of our trainings is with Jerry and Joseph Buddenberg from the ALF. They actually do the training. That's right there here on our channel. So Mike asks another question, different question. Where did the egg-laying chicken case that you worked on occur? Anything you want to say about that?
Yeah, that was in Lancaster County, Pennsylvania. It was like, that's Pennsylvania Dutch County, if anyone's been to Lancaster County, Pennsylvania. And there's tons of like, this wasn't necessarily a Mennonite farm, but it was Mount Joy, Pennsylvania. It was among that part of Pennsylvania.
Very good. And hold on. What body cam would you recommend from CDA Activism?
That's something I wouldn't put on YouTube for the whole world to see, but I'm sure somebody could recommend something in a more private space.
Okay, that makes sense. So is there any more questions? I'm looking for more questions. I hope I didn't miss any. We're still here for questions right now. So let's see what some of the comments are here. Lopsided Heart said, I've heard of a couple people getting caught and they normally just kick you out or possibly ban you from the store. I think that's in reference to stickering. Mm-hmm. What if you're at a protest and someone attacks you? Is it legal to punch in self-defense or do anything, touch someone in self-defense?
I mean, the circumstances are so important. I think you should be able to defend yourself. And that's something that ultimately you're going to be in a court and it's going to be a he said, she said, or she said, who knows? Or they said, that's going to be, you are allowed to defend yourself, but the level of your self-defense there is a limit to it. And it really does depend on which state court or county court you're brought under. Try not to get attacked, but if you're attacked, you need to protect yourself.
You have to protect yourself at your own risk, unless you can run.
Yeah.
Run first.
Right.
I guess, punch second if you can't get away. So, so Deb Thompson asks, do you think that we are in more progressive times now or worse?
I think progressive times for sure. I mean, absolutely. Look, I'm just talking as someone who, when I went vegan, there was one brand of vegan cheese and it went moldy within 2 days of opening and putting it in your fridge. And now, there's a whole shelf of multiple vegan cheeses. I know that's such a silly example, but it's just to sort of show vegan marketing and vegan options have increased so substantially in the past 20 years of me being vegan. And I think animal rights activism, especially with social media, it's everywhere now. You can access it in a way that you just couldn't access it before. It was such a fringe thing. I can't emphasize this enough. In the 90s and the early 2000s, it was such a fringe thing. You could go 10 years and not meet another animal rights activist or another vegan if you don't look for them. If you don't go to it was the Animal Rights Conference in DC every year. If you don't go there, you're not going to meet another vegan. That's how it was. And now you have the internet and you have ways of gathering online with people who might live across the country from you but have the same ideals as you. So I think it's absolutely growing, and I think the world is much more progressive and vegan friendly. I mean, walking into a restaurant that has foie gras on the menu, which is so nasty, but they also have a vegan shepherd's burger or whatever. It's crazy that these restaurants that normally would be so meat centric and they still have a vegan option. So yeah, I think we're in a much more progressive time. And again, I say this as an aged vegan who grew up at a time when there was one brand of vegan cheese, one brand of vegan burger, put them together and that's your dinner for 5 nights a week. That's
absolutely, that is a measurable change.
Yes.
Brands, it's exploding. So Jackie asks, hey Jackie, if arrested, what is the first thing to do?
I mean, don't say anything. Make sure you're represented by a lawyer before you say anything. You don't have to say anything. And they give you Miranda rights for a reason. Anything you say can and would be used against you. So you really should just keep your mouth shut. and try to get a friend to help you get a lawyer as soon as possible.
Yeah, and again, AAM has a couple of online workshops about handling police, how
Right.
how to react, what to do, what not to do. All of
Great.
those. It's always good to review that because I forget, we all forget. It's always good to have a refresher at that. So Chelsea asks, she says, thank you, by the way, for this. Can you point us to any info on or research about the legality of typical tactics against restaurants, like the ones that serve foie gras, like phone jamming, Yelp reviews, fake reservations? Is there any legalities to be concerned about with any of those tactics?
I think those could be argued to be harassment. Some of those, like I think a restaurant would have a leg to stand on and say they're harassing us and they're hurting our business. I mean, it's just like with when you looked at the history of the Animal Enterprise Terrorism Act and all of its predecessor legislation, when you affect people's bottom line and you hurt their financial well-being, all hell breaks loose. And that's when the courts get involved, and that's when lawmakers get involved and law enforcement gets involved. So I would say if it's a small business owner and you have a potential to really hurt their bottom line and they can't pay their employees, I don't know if it's the most effective use of time, because the way the media is going to portray it is that you just put 25 people out of work. And one of them was a single mom of 6 kids, and her husband died 2 years ago, and she's has one leg. Like, you know what I mean? Like there's very I think the good isn't outweighed by the potential for bad, especially if it's a small business. So I just wonder if there's like a better outlet for activism than harassing I don't know why I went there. Was the question specific to a small restaurant? Is that what it said?
Yeah, absolutely. No,
Okay.
that was, well, yeah, they were asking about those, and we do use those. I mean, actively, those kinds of, and I was thinking, I don't know how they would prove it. They'd have to really, how would they arrest people for that if it's done at a distance anyway? But, um, I, you know,
Yeah, I was thinking more of like a campaign. Like first you warn them and say, you shouldn't serve foie gras, and if you don't stop serving foie gras, we're gonna shower Yelp with bad reviews, or we're gonna phone jam you or something. Like if it could be traced back to you, yeah, I think that's really that's problematic and it's not gonna end well. And again, it's like there's no good way. It just doesn't look good because you're putting a small business person and their employees, um, out of business. So.
yeah, no,
I
thank you.
guess I feel compassion towards the workers at these places. They just need to make money, and they might not have any other option but to work in the restaurant. And if they get fired because the restaurant goes under, like I just feel bad for those workers. So it's not my brand of activism. But again, I don't I don't like to slam anyone. We all need to be here.
So does anybody have any thoughts around that, or any other questions for Dara? Thank you. So I'm sure we'll have a couple more questions, but I'm wondering, will there ever be even a possibility for reversing or opposing the Eco-Terrorist Act? Like, do you think that's going to be in place forever? I know that, somebody has to lobby for that, or somebody in politics currently would have to. What do you think the chances of that, of ever reversing that?
Yeah, I think it was Dennis Kucinich was on our side and really tried to repeal it. We had a group that I was part of, and we drafted a ban of the Animal Enterprise Terrorism Act, and that didn't go anywhere. And the Shack case, they appealed to the Third Circuit, they lost there, and then they appealed to the United States Supreme Court. And you file something called a writ, and the Supreme Court decides whether or not they're going to hear the case. So if you argue with the circuit court and you say, I want to take this to the Supreme Court doesn't have to listen to it. What they do is they choose, like, I don't know what number, let's say 10 cases that they're going to hear for the spring term. And out of 50 cases, they're going to choose 10 that they're going to hear. So the year that the Shack case was they filed writ for the United States Supreme Court, because I think all the lawyers were confident if the United States Supreme Court looked at this law, there's no way they could say that this law is constitutional. It is so unconstitutional on its face. Like, how could the biggest court of the land see this as okay? So if that case can just get in front of the Supreme Court. So they filed for writ, and the court denied writ, meaning they're not going to hear the Shack case. Instead, what they typically do is they take one corporate rights case, they take one First Amendment case. So instead of taking the Shack case as its First Amendment case that term, they took the Westboro Baptist Church case. So it was Snyder v. Phelps, which is Westboro Baptist Church are the people who stand outside of military funerals with signs that say God hates the F word. They protest homosexuals in the military. And they're really like a despicable group, but they were protesting at these military funerals and having these terrible slogans on their signs. And the question was, do they have the right to be there? And the Supreme Court took that case instead of the Shack case. They decided, we're going to talk about the First Amendment in the context of the Westboro Baptist Church. And what they decided that year was that, yes, the Westboro Baptist Church has the constitutional right to hold up those awful homophobic signs at military funerals. So it was so frustrating for animal rights activists because they could have protected the First Amendment rights of animal rights activists that term. But instead, they decided to protect the First Amendment rights of these like homophobic protesters. So it was like, it's such a gut punch in so many ways. And that's a long way of saying that the Supreme Court had the chance to overrule or to rule that the Animal Enterprise Terrorism Act was unconstitutional, and they didn't take the opportunity to do so. It just really like made everybody feel like they lost hope. That said, it has been struck down in the AETA 4 case because that was ridiculous. Again, that was the chalking case. And I think if we just have lawyers like continuously chipping away at it, there's a chance that we could see some court overturn it in some circuit across the country.
Yeah, Deb Thompson was saying, didn't President Obama make a comment about the over-the-top prosecution of peaceful animal rescuers in civil disobedient cases?
I don't think so, but he did. Did he sign the PACT Act? Or no, I think that was Donald Trump. There was a federal animal welfare law that was passed, I think, maybe it was like reviewed under Obama. I don't know. I think Trump signed it into law. There was something that, Obama signed, I think, the Truth in Labeling Act, which protects people who are buying coats to make sure that if it says faux fur, that it's actually faux fur, or if it says raccoon fur, it doesn't come from raccoon dog, which is a canine breed. So that was a law passed by Obama, but no, it wasn't specific to. I don't think of Obama as having made a statement or anything about peaceful animal rights activists, but maybe.
Could be. If anybody else remembers anything around that, feel free to comment in the chat. But another question is, and folks, we will be looking to wrap up around 8:30 or so. So just giving you all a heads up, but not yet. Do you think that if the vegan movement had more money, that animal ag could we fight their corruption more easily? Is it a money thing?
Yeah, I mean, money would help. Money would help because money speaks. And the agricultural lobby is super rich and super powerful. The pharmaceutical lobby has so much money and they fund lobbying groups. Animal rights don't have a ton of lobbying groups. And with respect to the lobbying groups we have, they're not as powerful as the agricultural and pharmaceutical lobbies. So I hate to say it, but yeah, you can, there was a book, I think it was called Conquer Washington, $10 a day or something. I mean, the idea is you can buy politicians, and that's what that whole concept behind opensecrets.org is like the people who are paying money to these politicians really have a lot of influence. Money speaks volumes to lawmakers. So I hate to say it because it sucks, but yeah, money does buy laws, and we might have more power with more money. You know, don't hate the player, hate the game. Like, it's just, that's the game.
Yeah, we can't. Yeah, it almost makes me want to say you can't fight City Hall, but we can fight City Hall, right? Yeah, so we'll take a couple more questions before we wrap up. But Chelsea asks, do you know anything about rules around obscuring your identity during an action? Example, when calling USDA, RE pig gas chambers, or saying you're just shopping to enter a store to protest them selling fur? Like, yeah. Lying or obscuring, as you know, when trying to hide your identity or slip in somewhere.
The only crime that I can think of, I don't want to speak out of turn. You definitely aren't allowed to lie to gain employment, which is, by the way, how most investigators get their footage. with their spy cameras is that they are lying and saying, oh, I worked on a farm with my dad since I was 12, and you should hire me. So lying is an essential part of getting jobs in certain industries if you want to conduct an undercover investigation. But technically, there are laws against lying to gain access to employment or to gain access to facilities. And I think that's pretty state dependent and industry specific. But like, if you're just on the street, you don't have to tell anyone anything. You really, or even if you're on private property and you don't want to say your name, you don't have to. They could ask you to leave, and they can say, if you don't identify yourself, you have to leave, and then you have to leave because you're trespassing. And once they tell you to leave, you got to leave. But like, you don't have to tell them anything.
Good rule of thumb, say the least amount possible, say nothing whenever possible. Be silent.
Yep.
Not easy for most of us to do. We have such a impulse and a knee-jerk reaction to be verbal, but when it comes to activism, sometimes when there are authorities around, just to keep it buttoned up a bit. Okay, we'll do a couple more quickies.
Yeah, just a point about that is I think people think if law enforcement is asking your name, you have to give it. And you don't. Like, you can say, am I under arrest? Are you arresting me right now? You can say that. But absent that, like, you don't have to say anything,
Or am I being detained? Detained is the step before being arrested, right?
Yeah, and I don't know if it's a term of art in different states, so I'm a little scared to speak nationally about that, but
we'll look that up. Do you think we should get more involved in politics? Example, run for office, support candidates, voting blocks? Yes, the answer is yes. Yes, do that. But what do you think?
Oh, yeah, I totally agree. I would,
yes.
Believe me, I will be behind you. You should see the way I get behind Eric Adams or Cory Booker. Like, the second I hear there's a vegan running for office, I'm all over that.
We are all over that. If you get footage, not undercover or hidden camera, of an aquarium or zoo, can the business sue you if you post what you saw on social media to educate the public? That's a good question.
Yeah, I don't think so. You were there as a member of the public?
Right.
Yeah, no, if you were there as a member of the public, then, I mean, I see people on Facebook all the time posting photos of like a trip to the zoo and stuff. Like, that's, how is that any different? The only difference is the messaging. Like, people that, some people are saying, hey, look, my kid saw a giraffe. And some people are saying, look at these poor animals in this animal prison. But it's the same picture. So if the message behind it is different, then you shouldn't be prosecuted for that same picture. So I think it's fine. You were in a public place and you took a public video. People don't have an expectation of privacy when it's like in public like that. Like, people can take pictures of you on the street. They're really not allowed to use your likeness for marketing. They really can't stand to make like a profit off of using an image of you on the street. But for the most part, they can take a picture of you. You're in public. You don't have
and post it, and it's legal to post it as well.
Yeah.
If it's done in public.
Yeah, I mean, you lose your right to privacy the second you're sort of on the streets. Now, again, it's how the photo is used. You can't use it in a commercial without someone's consent. So if they take a picture of you eating a veggie dog and then they put you on an Oscar Mayer commercial or something, like, you can sue them. No one's allowed to use your likeness for for financial gain. So there is an important distinction there.
That's why you see folks like Joey Carbstrong filming every interaction he has and posting them online without fear or worry of repercussion in terms of the legality of that. Are you good to go one more question or so, Dara? Is that all right?
Sure.
I mean, I think the questions might keep coming, so we might have to stop. But so Mohan asks, affiliation with meat and dairy producers and how that influences the dietary guidelines.
I'm sorry, what's the question?
I guess it's, how do brands that affiliate with meat and dairy, I'm not sure, Mohan, what you might want to clarify that.
Are we talking about like the dietary guidelines that the government gives to schools to promote, like, meat at the top of the pyramid? And is that what we're talking about? Like what is that called? The food pyramid?
the food pyramid, it still exists, right? It's a little bit
Yeah.
different than it used to be 20, 30 years ago, but it's
Totally different now. I don't even think it's a pyramid. I think it's a plate. But yes, it changes every year. And yeah, I think historically that was probably influenced by meat and dairy and stuff. And now I think health groups are sort of saying like we have to be a little more truthful about this, and you don't have to drink dairy milk. You can drink alternative plant milks, and so I think that's changing too. I mean, you would laugh if you saw 30 years ago what we were told in school was like a healthy breakfast. It's ridiculous. I think nutritionists and health scientists, even those who aren't vegan, are coming forth with actual data and saying those nutritional guidelines should be based on data and not based on financial interests and farmers in America.
It reminds me, it's the same thing as cigarettes so long ago, before anybody said that cigarettes were even dangerous in general. And my mother always tells me that her doctor, when she was pregnant with me, told her to keep on smoking. It's not time to quit because it's going to stress you out too much.
Wow.
Like it's saying, like, science evolving kind of thing. So let's see, I'll ask you maybe the final question and then I'll give it back to you to see if you have any final words for that. But anything you want to say about like Wayne Chung and his case or cases that you observed that you think is important cautionary tales for us, or hopefulness from all of that, or in general?
Yeah, I mean, I think, what did he get, 90 days in prison or something? But I think what's fascinating about that, and I love the media coverage about it, I really have seen a lot of good media coverage on this, emphasizing that the federal government chased down these two little piglets traveling to different sanctuaries and cutting off 2 inches of a pig's ear to test the DNA and see if it was the stolen piglets, right? And when you talk about the cost of the stolen piglets, I'm not going to get this number right. It was either like 36 cents or 42 cents for the total cost of the piglets. So we're talking about the theft of 42 cents worth of property. And again, I use, air quotes, property. The federal government must have paid tens of thousands of dollars for the value of 2 piglets, which again is under 50 cents. And again, not the internal intrinsic cost of the little piglet to its mother, but of course I'm talking about like to that farm, that piglet was worth, I don't know, again, 20 something cents, the 2 piglets together maybe 42 cents, and the federal government put tens of thousands into that one case. So the way these, and again, I really applaud these journalists who are not vegans or animal rights activists, but they do see, they're wise enough to see the absurdity of it. I just want someone to make a movie about that and just to show the numbers, like, whether a documentary or a fictionalized version of the story, but how ridiculous that the federal government was so concerned and went to such great lengths for, again, something that's really less than 50 cents in value. That to me is the most like absurd part of Wayne's case, and most impactful. And yeah, I think it's a sign that things are going to go in the right direction. I mean, he was not tried under the Animal Enterprise Terrorism Act, and that says a lot. So I'm interested. I'm anticipating to see where it goes, and I hope there's more coverage about that, about the lengths the federal government will go to criminalize animal rights activism.
History in the making, right? To be continued. Really landmark kind of case, and reminds us of this backwards world that we're sort of living in. Well, up is down and down is up and left is right and right is left. And I thought we were trying to save lives here. So, yeah, and Deb Thompson reminds us that the jury in Utah found him not guilty. So yes, that's our friend and fellow activist, Wayne. So Dara, anything you want to sort of say in closing? Any final words of hope? When do you think we'll have a vegan world? I always ask people, like, give us an exact date of when the vegan world will be here, so we can take that to the bank and plan accordingly.
Yeah, I mean, people don't come to me for words of hope. That's not something I'm known for. But I will say, again, I mean, I don't know. I feel like my story about vegan cheeses is like a story of hope. But I will say, and I celebrate every one of you who's out there fighting for animals and doing all that you can. And there's no wrong thing to do if you feel like it's the right thing and it's making you feel better at night. Every choice you make, like at the dinner table or in the supermarket, those are all important choices. And I say, like, every vegan is an activist by default. They might not get out on the streets and protest, but they're making choices multiple times a day to not consume animal products. And that's to be celebrated. And if you want to take it a step further and go to a protest or do a campaign or run for office, more power to you. I hope you do, because we definitely need more active activists out there. Remember that statistic from the CIS, how we've just, like, whatever they called animal rights attacks and plots, like, they've decreased so much over that 7-year time period, and we need to bring that back up. So the next study they do, they say, well, look at that. We have an increase in animal rights activity. We need to bring it back up, and we need to figure out how to do so in a safe, secure way, despite the internet and social media and artificial intelligence. Like, we just need to figure out what our new normal is, what our new way of doing activism is, given the cameras that are everywhere. And we'll do it. I have hope that we'll do it. In every decade, animal activists have figured out a way to make extreme, impactful change. And I have no doubt we'll continue to do that in this new era.
Yeah, and building on that hopeful note, we always are reminded that in every other social justice movement, it's been small groups.
Mm-hmm.
You know, it hasn't been needing to get to 50% of the population. It's a small percentage of the population, you know, but taking consistent actions over time.
Yeah, I love that.
Yeah, this has been really, really amazing, Dara. Thank you so much. And thank you everybody who joined us tonight live. And we hope that folks will watch the replay, you know, as well. And please I'll say buy Dara's book, Muzzling a Movement. Buy it for a few friends. Dara, your website is daralovitz.com. Is that right?
That's right, daralovitz.com. Thank you so much for having me here. This has been a real honor. I appreciate the forum.
Thank you. Hold on, everybody. Let me just give you a couple of announcements before we close out. Our next program is March 28th. It's called Budget Friendly Self-Care for Animal Rights Activists. So also please check out all our previous workshops here in our YouTube channel and subscribe while you're here. Also follow AAM on social media. Please consider becoming a patron by finding AAM on Patreon. Your donations allow AAM to continue to provide free educational resources for activists, which ultimately saves more animals. So thank you all for being here and all the tireless work you're doing for the animals. Thank you again, Dara, for all of your wisdom and for your time. If you're interested in becoming a mentor or mentee or want to get more involved with AAM, our website again is animalactivismmentorship.com. Stay strong, everyone, and live vegan.
Thank you.
Thanks, y'all. Bye. Good night. Good night.
Good night. Thank you.
Night.